This is America First on the Salem Radio Network. Now we are connecting to the mothership. Yes, indeed. The epicenter of the conservative movement. It is the Heritage Foundation, fighting for our founding principles every single day, especially now when we see billions and trillions of your taxpayer dollars sloshing around the swamp. And we're talking to the Vice President for Government Relations, Tommy Binion. You can follow him at TP Binion on Twitter. Tommy, welcome back to America First.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be with you.
So what's the latest? So we've been told, and I find this, I know it's difficult to put myself in the mind of Nancy Pelosi is not something I relish, but to try and argue the Democrat logic of the fact that there's this massive potential bailout coming, not something I'm a fan of myself personally, but she flies back from California, Tommy, to torpedo this. How does, or to stuff it full of Green New Deal, carbon footprint, concessions to solar panels, how does that make political sense? Have you come up with some possible rationale?
I didn't come up with it, but Nancy Pelosi's deputy, the majority whip in the House, Jim Clyburn, did come up with some rationale. He said, and this is a quote I'm reading to you, "This is a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision." That is a redux of Rahm Emanuel's "Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste." You see, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Jim Clyburn are apparently seeing this bill and this crisis moment as an opportunity for political and partisan gain rather than a mandate to help to get people the help that they so desperately need in the middle of this crisis. And so what they did, the playbook is, first you've got to stop the bill, and that's what we saw on Sunday night.
Yes.
Then you've got to obstruct any progress. That's what we saw today with another failed cloture vote at 1:30. And then you've got to find a negotiating partner over whom you have leverage so you can get these changes to, quote unquote, restructure it to fit your vision into the bill. And that is, I'm afraid, where we are now. They're negotiating with Steve Mnuchin to put their vision into this bill. That's the present status quo, as it were.
This is a recent tweet from the president's son, Donald Trump Jr. Democrats trying to cram in tax breaks for solar panels and emission standards for airlines into a relief pill that would help millions of Americans tells you all you need to know about the Democrat Party and their, quote, priorities. We have a very fresh audio cut from Senator Lindsey Graham, who had a rather bleak vision of what this all means. This is Senator Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, cut 11.
I'm confident that if we don't produce a product today, then that will be the end of the Senate as we know it in the eyes of almost every American. We will have failed miserably.
The end of the Senate in the eyes of almost all Americans. Is it that bad, do you expect, Tommy Binion, or will blame be laid on those that are really being obstructionist?
I hope that the American people see who it is that they can blame for this calamity. But I fear that Lindsey Graham is right, that what you see, if you're working hard from home, taking care of your family on a busy day like today, that what you see in the evening news or as you're driving home listening to this program is a total circus, a group of partisan animals who can't get it together enough to get the relief out the door. I think he's right. A tremendous amount of credibility is at stake. This is, we all know this instinctively, but I think it's important to say it out loud. This is not an ordinary moment inside the United States Congress. This is not business as usual.
No.
This is extremely important business, but apparently it's politics as usual. And that ought to enrage anybody who spends the time necessary to figure out what's really going on here.
Is your sense that people, we live in the swamp, we follow these things, we're, junkies when it comes to politics and policy, but most Americans simply want action. Is that your sense, Tommy?
They want action. They want the parties to put aside their differences and do what they agree on. And they want those things especially at a time like this. This is one thing when it's an annual spending bill or, a health care policy. This is a national crisis. And I got to imagine they're very disillusioned watching this on TV with the red numbers from the stock market and the red numbers from the coronavirus in the side panel there. I got to imagine that they are really disheartened by this display.
Yeah. People want to see results, and especially the man who's at the top of it all, my former boss, the President of the United States. He is about results. We're talking to Tommy Binion, Vice President for Government Relations at the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. Follow him at TP Binion. We're going to get to your calls after the next segment with Tommy. Don't go anywhere. Greg, Richard, Harold, Dante, and Mark. In the meantime, please understand, I'm very serious when I say this. When you support our sponsors, you make this possible.
This country was founded by geniuses, but it's being run by a bunch of idiots. Why do the members of the United States Senate continue to double down on stupid? We have spent hours and hours and hours negotiating these provisions with our Democratic friends. This is not a slush fund. This is a bill to help people and businesses in America.
That was Senator Kennedy just a few moments ago. I think really saying it how it is. This is the man who gave us that immortal audio cut with regards to the Speaker of the House. And I'm quoting directly. It must suck to be so dumb.
It must suck to be that dumb.
Nicely done, Shad. Let's go back to our guest. If you believe in the founding principles of our republic, please support the Heritage Foundation. They are there for you, and they've been there for you for decades. And we have the Vice President of heritage.org with us, Tommy Binion. Tommy, I'm just going to put you on the spot right now. What is wrong with all the proposals, the legislation that's gone through or is imminently may go through the House and the Senate, and what should be done differently with regards to our response to this current threat of the Chinese coronavirus?
Well, we're talking about a moment where a legislative solution is badly needed. There are a lot of people listening to this radio program that are worried about their jobs and they're worried about their families' health. And so let me say that the Congress needs to respond to this crisis strongly. This bill is not quite the ideal response. We're talking about $2 trillion. That even saying that number puts my stomach in a state of unease. And it's $500 billion for a vaguely described bailout. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is just kind of going to dole that money out at his discretion. If we are going to be bailing out big companies or certain industries, that should be an act of Congress. It shouldn't be left up to the discretion of the Treasury Secretary, either this one or the next Treasury Secretary. And then, it is overly broad. There are a lot of businesses that aren't going to be affected by the economic fallout of the coronavirus. A lot of businesses that are doing just fine, maybe even better because of our circumstances have changed a little bit.
And they'll be getting money as well under this current agreement.
Exactly. And if you give them money, then you're not helping the people who need it most with the most amount of resources you could be helping them with. And then we know, as we talked about last week, when you bail companies out, you change the incentives for the economy forever. So no longer is it important to run your business with a rainy day fund. Yeah. No longer is it important to run your business not at the very edge of the margin. Because if you're valuable enough to the United States, the federal government and the taxpayers will put a backstop on your business. And we just can't be liable for that as taxpayers. That cannot be a burden we're going to take on forevermore.
Economic behavior is human behavior, and incentives are crucial. And if you give the wrong incentives, you will be doing lasting damage to the way our economy works. We're talking to Tommy Binion, Vice President for Government Relations at the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. In the last minute we have with you, Tommy, what is the most important thing that we should be doing right now from the federal level? What is the relationship that should be protected by any measure coming out of Congress or the White House?
The president said this in his press conference last night. He said it is imperative to keep employees attached to their employers.
Yes.
He said that because he is forward-looking and he is imagining a day when we are coming out of this crisis, and rather than people attached to government programs and benefits, we want people attached to the employer they were attached to when this crisis began. The day these restrictions are lifted, we want people to go back to work, not to have to go to the welfare office to collect their checks.
So in 30 seconds, how do we keep them attached to those companies? What's the measure?
The benefits have to flow through the employer to the employee. So if you're trying to help an individual, give the employer a tax credit for any wages paid to the employee during this crisis. It's an epidemic tax credit. It's a simple idea. It would work fantastic.
I'm just not seeing the requisite level of imagination from the people who are advising the president or the people who are drafting this legislation. You said it. The president gets it in his gut how we keep these companies on their feet and able to re-engage once we're out the other side. God bless you. I know that you and your colleagues are working so hard now to break down the swamp tendencies and to get the right solution. Thank you to Kay Cole, James, and everybody at the Heritage Foundation. Keep doing what you do. Thank you, Tommy. I'm Sebastian Gorka. We're going to have a quick update on matters in the cultural war, then take your calls. Greg, Richard, Harold, Dante, Mark, don't go anywhere. We are broadcasting from the ReliefFactor.com studio.